oops, wrong one. Let's do main and guest. And let me just make sure everybody can hear me okay. Perfect. So we'll get started here in a minute. All right. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Guthels, Sarah, for letting me know that you can hear me. Let's get started. Okay, so today we are going to be looking at different low-code AI ways to build machine learning models, and we're going to be using a data set of bird images to classify them. So we're going to be using computer vision. We're going to look at 3 different ways to build that model, 2 in depth, and then the third one we'll kind of just touch on. So first, I'll start with who am I? So I am Cassie Breviu. I'm a cloud developer advocate at Microsoft. My background is actually as a full stack .NET software engineer, and then I transitioned into doing more AI stuff a couple years ago. I love it. It's super fun. And so I definitely recommend, if you haven't tried out with it, if this is like your first kind of introduction, to go play around with things after this, and I will provide some resources as well. And maybe you have built models before and you're familiar with this, then hopefully you'll see some new tools and ideas of things that you could do. So a question I get a lot is, where do I start? So if you're not used to building machine learning models and you're like, I want to start, but I don't really know what to do. And I felt that same way. I remember, having the different virtual assistants, and I'm like, how does that work? It seemed kind of like it was too complicated or too hard. And so one of the things that I always say to start with is a question you want to answer. And so there's some questions that machine learning are good at answering, and there's some that aren't. Classification is what we're going to be looking at. So it's like, what class does it belong to? So they're going to be what species of bird, right? So try to think of a question. If you can't think of one, there's tons of tutorials out there that will give you the question and give you step-by-step instructions as well. And then once you get started, just keep building until something works. And oh, let me see the check here. What is it saying? We can hear you, sorry, but can you please bring the microphone closer? Oh, okay. Oh, it got louder. I'm reading the chat here. I'll try to stay up on the chat as we go. So it sounds like some people are having audio issues, plus a lot of echo. Let me take a quick look at the OBS configuration and see. I can turn up the sensitivity. There we go. And maybe move it a little bit closer.
Someone's at front door.
Let me come back to the chat and see if that helped at all. Not an issue as such. More like audio coming through one channel. Sounds better now. Okay, so I think turning up the sensitivity on the preamp worked. Let me know if anybody else is having issues. Okay, so back to kind of where do I start? So one of the tools that I used to start with was the Azure Machine Learning Designer. And so that's a tool that one of the tools we're going to be looking at today. And this is a visual drag and drop tool that allows you to kind of visually create a machine learning model, which I think is really important when you're starting out too, because understanding the high level steps that you need to create a model, I feel like made it easier for me, because then I took this and then I reverse engineered it in Python, and then I went down that road. So I kind of went like a super weird way where most people might start, from the academic side and go deep into the math, and then start building maybe with TensorFlow or PyTorch or scikit-learn, and then kind of moving that way. I did something what's called top-down learning, where you start with the big picture and then you move down and you pull things apart. And I think with as developers, we do that a lot. We start kind of just playing around with things, and then things kind of click. So you can do the same thing that you do with maybe the new front-end framework, but with machine learning. And I also didn't know Python either, so I had to learn Python. But Python's a really great language. Coming from a C# background, I love both. I don't want to pick a favorite, but Python's a pretty fun language to play with. So I'm not going to go in detail on the full model building process, but just for the new people on the call that maybe haven't played with machine learning before, I just want to talk a little high level about how you would go about the process. So the first thing you need is data. You can't build a machine learning model without data. You need to find, select, and create your data features. And then from there, you're going to apply different pre-processing. And then once your data is prepared and ready to be trained, you apply a learning algorithm. So we're going to be doing computer vision models, which is convolutional neural networks, or CNNs. And depending on the model you're building depends on the algorithm you're going to use, which when we get into the designer, I'll show you the different ones we have available there. And then you select a candidate model. Once you think something's working well, then you test that model on unseen data. The unseen data is important. If you test the model on the same data that you trained with, it could look like it's performing really, really well, but in fact, it kind of memorizes the data that you give that model, and it's going to perform poorly when it goes into production. It was one of my rookie mistakes that I made. I thought it was like 100% accuracy. This is going to be amazing. And no, it wasn't. So I had to go back and figure out that the hard way. So that's another thing when you start kind of the backwards way. Sometimes you learn lessons the hard way, but that's okay too. So then once it's working good enough, then you deploy it to an API and you can consume that from your application. Good enough is kind of one of those hard things to choose. If it is performing at like 100% accuracy, that usually should kind of be a red flag. And that's really, the accuracy is how it performs on the validation set. You still should test it in like your staging or dev site as well. So that's just the high level of how to build a machine learning model. These transitions are cool. Okay, so another common question I get when people start thinking about building machine learning models is, should I use pre-built or should I use something custom? And it's a good question, and I like to draw a lot of parallels back to my traditional programming background. And even when you're building a software product, a lot of times you have to think about what is, or is there something out there that's going to solve my problem, or something I can just buy that will work, or do I need to build something custom for my business? And so that's kind of the same idea. It changes a little bit with machine learning, but I think that starting with, is there already a pre-built model that's going to work really well for my data set? Then I'm going to use that, because why do more work if I don't have to, right? A good developer is a lazy developer. We don't want to do more work than we have to. So here's kind of some questions that I ask myself then when I start thinking about pre-built versus custom. Like, is there a pre-built model there? Does it work well? Are there any limitations to it that aren't going to work for my solution? Can I solve my problem well? So sometimes a pre-built model, and I'll show you an example of that, like our computer vision model is a pre-built model that we may not want to use for this particular solution. It might be good enough, but it really depends on what you need. So you might want to go to custom vision, which we're going to look at, which allows you to customize a pre-built model using something called transfer learning. And then if neither of those were working to your liking, or maybe there was some limitation on the custom vision, I don't really know what there would be. Custom vision is pretty amazing, but maybe there was a reason that wasn't something you wanted to use. Then you could, okay, I'll look at the designer. And then if maybe there are limitations in designer, you can't build anything in there. Well, actually, let me take that back. You can build anything in there if you use the Python scripting, which I'll show you that. But if you try to use just out of the box modules, at this point you can. But once you use that Python scripting, then you can. And then maybe you want to just use straight up like PyTorch. So those are kind of the process I think through when I start thinking about building a solution. Does someone know how to fix that sound coming from one left side? I'm not sure. Looks fine here. Okay. I'm not sure what sound you're talking about from the left side. Could you, if it's like an echo, looking at the chat here. Okay, I'm gonna keep going until I get some more info there. So as I was talking about, there's the 3 different ways that we're going to look at building this model. We're going to look at custom vision and cognitive service. And you're not familiar with cognitive services, I'll show you what those are, but there are pre-built models in Azure, visual tool with designer, and then custom code. So those are the 3 different ways that we're going to be looking at this. Already fixed. Okay, cool. Thank you. So the first thing I want to look at is our APIs, and I will paste this link in here for you as well. Our cognitive services, I meant. All right, so here is that link that I'm at right now. And so when I'm thinking about using a custom service within Azure, I'm going to take a look at our cognitive services, or I'm sorry, our pre-built models in Azure. And you can see that we have a lot of different ones. We have decision for anomaly detection. We have language ones for language understanding. Q&A maker is really, really cool. You can take an FAQ page and feed it in and train a model. So you could have a bot that will actually represent the data on your FAQ page. Text analytics, so sentiment analysis, key phrase, entity extraction, translators. And then there's also speech to text, text to speech, and vision. So we want to look at the vision one. And the first thing I want to show you is computer vision. So computer vision is a pre-trained computer vision model that you would just create and use. And the cool thing about our docs here as well is that you can go in here and just try them out. So if I were to upload one of my images here, let me, I think I have one, okay. So I'm gonna upload a crow image here, and then you're gonna see what computer vision would return back. So it's gonna tell you everything that's in the image. It's an animal, we can see that it's a bird. Raven is high up there, we see crow, we see American crow. It's not the highest confidence though, it's at 70%. So if this was good enough, like maybe you don't want to have to dig through this data, and maybe you just want one answer of just what is the species of bird, then you probably wouldn't want to use this computer vision model. But this might be good enough for what you want to use for computer vision. Maybe you just want these different tags, and that would be enough to solve your problem. So that's kind of an example of how this could work for this solution, but it depends on what the end result is that you want. So for what we want to use computer vision because we just want to know the species. We don't want all this other stuff, and we don't want to have to try to have logic to sift through that programmatically. So what we want to do then to create our computer vision model is create a resource. So I'm going to check the chat here again. It's still the left channel. Okay. So first, when you go to create a resource, you can just click create resource. And if you're familiar with Azure, I'm sure you're familiar with the creating resource process. It's the same for all, right? But you can go into AI machine learning. You can see different ones there. I can also search custom vision, and then it'll bring up the search results. And then I would click create, and then I would create my resource. So when you go to create a resource, we want to create both a training and prediction resource. So it's going to create two, one for training our model, one for creating our prediction endpoint. And then we want to give it a group and a name and all of this good stuff. But since it takes a minute to create, I'm actually going to flip over to one that I have already created. So in my module, you can see here, I have the cognitive service and I have the prediction key, and I can go to the custom vision portal. So in this portal, I can see different ones that people have created under our subscription. I'm actually going to use something that I created. So I'm going to do all of the training and project creation in Python and in Jupyter Notebooks. However, you could do everything that I'm going to do in the UI without doing any code. So I pasted in the GitHub repo here if you want to take a look at it. I will show a little bit more of it, but right now I want to get my Jupyter Notebook running. So I'm going to open up Windows Terminal. And I have a Anaconda. So I have Anaconda actually added into my Windows Terminal, which I absolutely love. So if you use Windows Terminal and Anaconda, do this. It will make your life better. And then I also have a profile that I created for this that's already in the location that I want to go. So I'll just type Jupyter Notebook to start up my Jupyter Notebooks. And I will paste in the blog I have here. I don't know why it's opened here. Want you here, okay. To add this to your Windows Terminal if you want. Okay, so I'm going to open up this notebook that I have created. And so if you're not familiar with Jupyter Notebooks, they're used a lot in machine learning and Python and creating models. And it's definitely like, so coming from like Visual Studio and C# using notebooks, using the REPL kind of like philosophy of development, it was definitely like a change, but it's also really cool and I've come to actually really love and enjoy it. So to run each cell, you just hit Shift Enter. And then from here, you'll see I've already added in my endpoint. I've already added my training key. I've added an iteration name, my resource ID. And this you'll find in the properties of the resource itself. And then I'm going to create a custom vision training client. And then I'm going to create that project. And when I create that project, I'm going to tell it what type, or I'm going to give it a name, tell it what type of model I want to use, and tell it I want to use a multi-classification, and then the platform. So if I run this, we will see that a project is created. So now if I go back to custom vision and refresh, we'll see that we already created our project. And the other thing is you can create the project here, and you can take a different look at some of the different models. A lot of questions people ask is what's the difference between compact and general. Compact is going to be a smaller model, and that one you can actually export into TensorFlow.js or whatever, or Onyx format. So different formats that depending on what you want to use it, and you can run it in a container then as well. So that is a really cool feature of this. I'll exit out of this though. So I'm going to go back here, and the first thing I want to do is get a list of tags. So I'm just looking at my current directory, and then I'm going to loop through the directories and create a list of tags based on the names. So the data set that I'm using is from the Cornell Labs here. And the other thing I want to show you quickly is so I'm using a subset of it. I'm not using the full data set. But you can download the full data set, and there's also a Learn module on how to do this that I wrote on how to classify bird species with computer vision, and you can download the subset of the data set there as well. So I just wanted to point that out quick. So if anybody's wondering how to get that data set or where to get the data set, that's the spot to get it. Okay, so next I want to create some methods that I'm going to call to loop through all of the images and upload them to custom vision and create the tags for me. So I'm just going to create that method. This is going to create a tag based on the name, so the name of the folder. Oh, I should show that quick too. Let me get that directory up so you can see what the data is as well from my side. Sorry, I meant to have this up already. So I wanted to have some like music going, but I can't find any copyright free music. So if anybody has like a good source for copyright music, so when I stream on my channel, I always have music going. So then like you don't have the like silence while I have to go look for things. I think maybe I need to make some music that I can use. Well, actually, I can open up another one of these, and then I can do Explorer dot. That's like way easier than what I was trying to do. Okay. So from here, if I go into bird photos, I have a train and validation. So again, I want to have the photos that I'm going to use for training and the ones that I'm going to use for validation. And then within the training one, I have the tags. And then within there, I have the actual images that we're going to be using. So that's what my folder looks like, and that's what my data set looks like. All right, so we're creating that. Then we're going to create an image list to upload based on the tag. So the tag is again the name of the folder, which is also our label, which is the bird species. And then we're going to create that list and return it. And then we're going to upload that list. Oh, and if you take a look at the image list that we create an image file create entry. We have the contents of the file from reading it out, and then we're adding that tag so that custom vision knows what the actual tag is. And then I'm gonna call this, and this is gonna loop through all of those pictures and upload them. It's gonna do 25 at a time. Otherwise things take too long. Have AI generated music. I love it. You know, I have actually played with some MIDI files where there's like Python libraries where you can actually pull apart the music. And then there's also a really cool library called Google Magenta. Okay, I'm gonna go on a little tangent here. Sorry, I get way too excited about music. But they are machine learning models that you can plug into your Ableton and actually create music from. It's super fun to play with. So if you do any music production or any Ableton stuff, that's really fun. You don't have to do any of it yourself. Or you can get really geeky and take MIDI files, pull them apart into text format. So you actually can get like the like an Excel sheet is what I usually did, and like take a look at how they work, which is also really interesting. So I have actually played with AI created music, and it's really fun. And it also makes my music, like if I use the Magenta stuff, it makes my music way better than if I just try to do it, because I'm not a music producer. I just like to play around. So this is going to take a little while to upload. It's going to, because there's a lot of images there. And one thing I wanted to show you while that uploads is another thing that I have in this repo that I sent you. So there's another cognitive service called Bing Search API. And you can search for all different types of things like news articles, images, whatever. But within the repo here, if you had something, let's say you wanted to build a computer vision model, but you don't have a data set and you wanted to, I don't know, what's something that like you could build that you want to build a machine learning model for computer vision? Anybody have an example they want to provide? No? Well, anyways, like let's say, we'll just use bird species. Maybe I didn't have this bird data set that I could use. You can actually use Bing Search and this Node.js app that I built to scrape a data set, and it'll actually separate it out as well into train and test based on mod 3, so approximately 30%. And so you can run this script to get a data set, and then you can run this next script that we're running in the Jupyter Notebook to create the model. So you can create computer vision models like really super quick with this code here if you want to do a custom vision. So I just wanted to point that out. If there's anybody that wants to play around with that later, that would be another good place to start because it's all there for you. Oh, and it is filtered by license. So when it hits the Bing search, so like if you were to go search images on Bing, like for whatever the search term is that you add into the script, you get the same results. So it's just hitting it from this service and then pulling those into and downloading them into a file folder for you. Let's see, are we still running? Okay, we're still going. Oh, one thing I do want to show you as this is going as well is if I click into here, you can see the tags are getting created. So you see that they're getting created and the images are getting uploaded for you. And if I were to do this through the UI, I'd have to hit add images, and I'd have to like search and upload and tag all of them yourself. How close up do the photos need to be? I'm thinking to set up a camera to capture my backyard. Those are very close up. So when you capture, are you thinking to classify birds? Like, is that the model you were thinking of? Or were you thinking, like, what are you trying to see in your backyard? Like, are you just wanting to know what's out there? Like, do you want like a general kind of tag, like at the computer vision model that we looked at? For if you are going to do like a bird feeder one, I would put it closer up to the bird feeder. But you could totally build this model, put it on a Docker container, add it to like a Raspberry Pi, and have a little camera, and then every so often, take a snapshot, post it, and get the result. Or maybe you'd want to, manually trigger it. So maybe you just want, like, you see a bird and you're like, what is that bird? You could trigger that picture and then get the result as well. So I'm not sure. It depends on what you're trying to do exactly with the backyard. But if it is bird images, I would recommend being closer up. The other thing that you can do though is you can set up cropping. So there's other machine learning models that will actually like find objects for you and like have a box around it, and then you can crop. So like when we go and look at how we are going to build this model in the in Designer, we have different processing that we can do to the image to help our machine learning model predict. So it depends on how good your camera is, and if you want to do the extra step of finding the object that you want, because you could use an object detection machine learning model, then crop to that and then post it. So I hope that's helpful, but that's probably how I would look at doing something like that. And then, yeah, you'd have to think about the resolution of that once you cropped it down and tried to zoom into the bird. And that might affect your accuracy as well if it's not very clear. Let's see, did we finish yet? Still going. Let's refresh here, make sure everything looks good. I guess it depends on what it can do. So yes, A, is there a bird, and are there multiple birds? What kinds of birds? So if there was like multiple birds, I think you'd want to do some cropping of the image and separate them out into separate ones and then post individually. But the other thing that I find is anytime I run into a problem that I'm not the first nor the last to have this issue. And so I do a little Google search and see how somebody else solved it and how it worked for them and what problems they might have had. And then that's kind of how I figure out what to do. So you might want to look up and see, because that's just kind of off the top of my head how I would think about doing it. Like there could be a better way to do it. In fact, there probably is. Oh, awesome. You took machine learning at university. Cool. Now, I'm sure you did Python, or did you do R? And then like what, did you build anything cool? How do I say that? Oh, Kevin Unit. I don't know why this is taking a long time to load. Let's see. I might go in here. So I think this is going, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Azure Machine Learning. So another service that we have that allows you to build models with the designer and custom models as well. So let me flip over to that. One second. So just like with anything else, when you want to create a resource in Azure, you go portal.azure, and then actually that's going to bring me to the wrong portal. I want the prod portal. And from there you would create a resource just like we did for computer or our custom vision that we're working on. And then we're going to click create a resource, and then we're going to click machine learning, and then the same thing that we would do to create this. But again, since that takes a minute to create, I'm just going to go ahead and go to the resource. So the cool thing, once you have the resource created, you can just go to ml.azure.com, and then you go directly into the Azure Machine Learning portal. And within here, you have tons and tons of tools to use to build models, and I'll go through some of those now. Yep, because we're still waiting. Okay. We did Python, and we built a simple feature calculation. Cool. That's awesome. So you can see like in the homepage, you have different like popular things that people use when they come in here. You can go into the notebooks, and one thing that I think is really cool, so I have my files, the different notebooks that I've created in here, but if I go to samples, they have all these different samples and tutorials on not only how to build different things, but how to use the SDK to interact with Azure Machine Learning. So there's I guess I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the experiments and pipelines. But if you have ever built custom machine learning models, sometimes they run the same model a lot. And to try with different hyperparameters, so like learning rates and different variables or parameters that you put in to help your model, they're called hyperparameters, to tune your model to make it predict well. And one thing that's really cool is you get that if you sync it up to Azure, and you can run it on a cloud VM, either from local or a cloud notebook, you get a full report on every run. And so if you are starting out with Azure Machine Learning and you're like, well, I don't really know how to do that, there's all these notebooks in here, and you can literally clone them right into your cloud notebook from here, which I think is really cool. So I've used those to help when I first started using it. And so they're a good resource to have. And also just to note that they're here, you can take a look at some of the different ones. See, I thought there was an automated machine learning one too that I thought was cool. So you can use automated machine learning from your notebook. You don't have to necessarily use the UI, but if you want to use the UI, you can. So if you're not familiar with automated machine learning is, it's kind of like machine learning for machine learning, where you just give it a data set, you tell it what you want it to learn, and it goes through and it tries all these different types of algorithms and different hyperparameters, and it uses something that we have called Hyperdrive, which is an automatic hyperparameter tuning tool for you. That will try different things, and it has different algorithms, and it'll drop different ones out to that aren't performing as well. So we have all that in automated machine learning, and you can use hyperparameter tuning or Hyperdrive outside of that as well, just on your custom models. So I'll talk about how you can deploy your model. Mr. Alex, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but I will show you some different ways, and actually I'll touch on that now if you want, because Designer we're going to go over, and we'll deploy that one completely, and we will deploy the custom vision one that we're making now as well. But in endpoints here, so I have already created an endpoint from the one that I created in Designer earlier that we're going to create again today. And so you can manage all this, and what it's actually doing is it's using Azure Container Instances on the back, so it'll spin up a container for your machine learning model that you can then run a classification, but you don't have to worry about all of the DevOps stuff. You can just create your model and register it in the models here, and then from here you can create the endpoint, and you can do that all through the SDK from your Jupyter notebook. So you could also, register a model manually here. So everything that you can do in the SDK, you can do in the UI. So I don't have to keep repeating that. Just know that pretty much everything. I know you're probably going to find something that you can't, but almost everything. I'll cover my bases. Very political that way. But anyway, so you register your model in Azure Machine Learning, and then you can say create an endpoint, and it automatically create an endpoint, and you don't have to worry about any of the DevOps stuff if you're not into that. So that then it will have better, more focused photos to help the ID. Oh, I think I missed something. So there's something in the Azure ML that will find bird-like things in your automatically taken photos and focus on those as part of your workflow. So we do have an object detection service in our computer vision model. You can see that this found that. I would actually have to look at it and see, but I know it'll give you coordinates that you could use. So there would be some manual stuff. Like I don't think it'll do it out of the box for you. So like if I were to upload an image to computer vision, actually I think it'd still be computer vision, and I had multiple birds in it. Like you see how this has multiple things in it, and it's like this is a person, and this was a train. Like it would do this, and if you take a look at the objects over here, it gives you the coordinates. So you could then take that information and crop with it, I think. Like I've never tried that, but I think that's how you could use a pre-built service to find where to crop it. But again, I would Google it and look at how other people did it, just because I don't necessarily know that that's the best way to do it. So let me flip back here. I'll get back to the questions in a second. Cool. Okay. So everything is created, and we can see that here in our portal. And so the next thing I want to do is actually train my model. So I'm going to run this here. This is going to go ahead and train it, and it's going to check to see if it's completed, and then print out if what's its status. So right now it's training. And if we go back here, we can see that it's training as well. So you could have clicked train from here. Again, don't have to always do it from here, but I just think this is really a really neat way to do it, and kind of automates things as well. Let me see if I can catch up on some chat here. So can you give some examples about where else endangered bird species with custom vision model could be used? I'm not sure if you know what you mean, like how you would use the model, or Yeah, I guess I'm not 100% sure on what you mean by that question. How long have I been using Azure ML from Tom? How long have I been using it? You know, it's gone through some different versions, and we've definitely made a lot of upgrades, and we continue to make a lot of upgrades. But really, like the first model that I built was in Azure Machine Learning Designer. It had a different name then, and it was actually outside of AML today. Like now it's really nicely integrated where if I go back over to here, so it's part of the service. So if you consider since I started using Designer, that would be like since I started doing machine learning, but this is many iterations after that. So I don't know, maybe 2, 3. I honestly time doesn't exist in my brain anymore. I'm so bad at time. So I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years, I guess, if I had to put a number on it, but I don't know. That's correct. I'd have to really think about it. But that's like one thing that's really cool about it is that there is so many updates and so many new things going in all the time. And it's just, it keeps getting better and better. Like I had to operationalize a model before we had these amazing deployment options within here. And I had to, create my own container instance and spin it up and do it all through code. And now it's just like all done for you in this service. So I wish I had that when I started using it. But yeah, if you think about it, the fact that I built my first model in Designer and then went from there and kind of reverse engineered it, I've been using it since, a long time. But it was a different iteration. Yeah, I'm sorry for the people that are having audio issues. Some people say it's okay, some it's not. I'll have to take a deeper look into that another time. But so one of the things that's cool about how Designer is really integrated in is, so when you have different data sets, then you can go here and you can actually upload different data sets. So you can also import data through different modules in Designer. But if you have just like an Excel or an image data set like we have here, you can go through and upload it here, and then you can actually use it in Designer. You can use it in your notebook, and it gives you the source code as well, or the sample code. So like I can just copy and paste this into my notebook and it'll download that data set, and I can use it in a custom model. And then I'm always using that same source. But then I can also use it in Designer as well. And yeah, so it's cool that it has like this one centralized place that you can access different data sets if you have a static data set like that, versus like maybe some of them you might have like a text data set and it's in like SQL or some sort of database. And then in here I have the different experiments. So I can actually click into here, and when I run this in my notebook, I'm actually creating the instance, the experiment in AML, and it's going to capture a bunch of data for me. I have pipelines, models. Again, we talked about that, and you can version your models in here. Another thing that's really fantastic. Endpoints, and then compute. So obviously we need compute, right? Unless you have some really cool GPU on your local machine or you have some sick setup at home. But if you don't, you can use cloud GPU, which is awesome. So we have compute instances that we're going to use to run our models, and clusters as well. Then we have inference clusters for deploying our endpoints to a Kubernetes service. And then we also have attached compute, which I think it's if you're using something on-prem and adding it, but I'm not 100% sure because I haven't actually used that one. To be completely honest there. But then the compute instances here, I can go into Jupyter Lab, which I already have open, and then I can have different notebooks that I can use on the cloud in the browser. But if you take a look here, I'm actually running this one locally. So you can do both depending on what you're working on and what you need. Cool, so it looks like our training completed. So if we take a look at our custom vision now, we can see that we have trained our model. We can see our different accuracy metrics. This I think is really cool. It actually lets you know if you have unbalanced data. So unbalanced data is like if I have a lot of one class of data, so like maybe I have a ton of cardinal pictures and not enough blue jay pictures. So what that can actually create is that it would, like when it would start guessing, it's weighted, and we want it to actually be balanced. We don't want to have too much of one because it will create issues with how the results are. It could inappropriately over predict a particular class. So there's different ways that you can fix that. You can maybe delete images from there. You could go find more images to add to your model. This one, it actually, the amount in the unbalanced classes don't really affect the accuracy too much, so I can just leave it. And that's something to take into consideration as well. So we are going to say this is good enough. And then I want to actually create my prediction client and get a prediction on one of my validations. So I'm going to look at what my current directory is, and I want to go back a directory because I want to look at my validation data set. So I'm going to create that URL. And if you remember when we looked at it originally, we had our training data and our validation data. There's my validation data, and it's an image of a crow. And then I can run this, and I will get back my result. So it is 100% certain that is American crow. So now I was able to do all of that through here. And if I wanted to just do a quick test, I could also upload an image here. So that's one way to build our model with custom vision. And then using the notebooks as well. So now we want to look at Designer. So when you go into Designer, there are some different samples available in here. So if there's something that you're thinking you want to do and you're not really sure what to start, there's different templates that you can just click on and it'll open it up. And then you could start changing it from there. You could start running it and picking it apart. So definitely check those out if you're new to Designer and kind of want to see how you do things. But when you go to create a model, you just want to click create a new model. And then you're going to come into here, and this is our canvas where we can actually build out our model. Let me rephrase. Are these models reusable in different business classes or cases? Sorry, I read that wrong. I'm still not sure I understand that question. So I'm gonna keep going. There's a lot of different business cases that you could use for a computer vision model, if that's what you're thinking, like really endless, like endless possibilities. Okay, so when we get to our designer, we need to select our compute. So I've already created a compute, so I'm just gonna go ahead and select the one. I did an NC6, which is a GPU machine. And you can choose, so basically like when you choose the different compute, you want to think about how much you want to spend, because like the bigger the machine, the more expensive when it runs. So think about that. NC6 is like kind of like the one that I go to for what I'm working on, and it tends to work well. It has GPU, and I'm never doing anything super huge. A lot of my stuff are kind of like little fun projects. So if you were doing something larger, you may need a bigger machine, and it'll just take longer on the like the more resources, the faster, that kind of thing. So I am going to use my data set that I already uploaded here, but there's also these sample data sets that I could use, and I could also import data. And if I just want to show you this quick, so if I import data, sorry, let me ignore the door there. There we go. Choose the data store, and then we would say new data store. And then from here, you can choose what the data source is. Like maybe you have these saved in a blob storage. Maybe you run like an Azure function that grabs images and puts them in a data store, and then you just want to automatically grab them from that place, and you don't want to deal with uploading your data set. You could do something like that. You could do it from Azure SQL. So you don't have to, export and upload your data set every time. And so when you're thinking about like retraining and stuff like that, you probably would want to do something more like the import data option. All right, so to start building out, I just drag and drop my data set onto the canvas here. I'm just gonna close this out for now. I'm going to go back to modules, and I'm going to show you some of the different modules that we have available in Azure Machine Learning. So for here, I showed you the data input and output stuff. Yeah, because you could also export it to like a storage as well. And then you could add columns, rows, apply math operation. Maybe you need to do some normalization things. You can do, SQL transform. You have a lot of different things that you can do in here. Convert to CSV, edit metadata. Ooh, there's even a normalized data. And then the other thing that I want to point out here is if you look, there's a help document. So one of the things that like when you're starting to build machine learning models, and I used this a lot when I first used the designer, I would be like, what is that? And it brings you directly to our docs page, and then you can read what it is. So I joke that like I learned machine learning from Microsoft Docs because like it's where I started and it's where I built my first model. And I used these links to start figuring what to do. And then from there, it gave me a really cool starting point, I think, or a really interesting starting point. So sometimes you might want to, exclude a column. So if you had a tabular data set, you can select the data columns that you want to add or remove. Feature selection, we have some statistical functions. And then we have our machine learning algorithms. So these are the pre-built models that we have available in Azure Machine Learning Designer. They cover a lot, but not everything. And so like I said, you could do Python scripting with a Python script module in order to build your own. Let me see if I can catch up on the chat here quickly. But hearing you talk through the concept is super helpful. It's also helped me learn how to use the terminology correctly. Oh, awesome. Thank you. Glad that's helping. Did I miss something about Forms Recognizer? I love Forms Recognizer. I won't go on a tangent, but I built a machine learning document classification from scratch, like before Forms Recognizer existed, and Forms Recognizer makes it so much easier. And I absolutely. So if you're not familiar with what Forms Recognizer is, on that link that I sent earlier, where you can go try out the different pre-built services, that's in there, and you can kind of try it out and see how it works for you. But you can grab like 5 PDFs. Train a model custom to like your invoices, and then it'll extract all the entities and all the information into a key value pages list, and you can then import that into whatever data source you were using, like whether it's SQL or Cosmos DB, whatever. So it's a really neat thing, and you can use it in our Power Automate, which is a like this, a drag and drop UI way to build different workflows. And you can use cognitive services in them. But okay, sorry, tangent. A little tangent there. Just thinking about healthcare DSM with a lot of forms. Yeah, we have a lot of cool stuff for healthcare. You should just probably take a look at some of our different offerings. And you can also, if you have like a specific question, feel free to send me a message on Twitter, Cassie Breviu. So the same name that I use on Twitch is my Twitter as well. But they have like healthcare bots. So they have like bots that you can build with a graphical UI that are pre-trained with healthcare terminology, which is also pretty cool. So there's a lot you can do. Okay, so back to the different machine learning algorithms that are available in the Azure Machine Learning modules. We have so regression. So if you're trying to predict a number, you can think about that. And then you have different types of ways of doing that. We have clustering. So this is something called unsupervised learning. So with our bird data set, we're actually giving it the label because the label is the name of the folder. And it's a supervised learning because we're giving it examples, our data, and labels, features and labels. With the clustering, it's just going to cluster like things together, and you don't have to label your data, which labeling data and going through that process can be one of the most time-consuming things when you start building. So sometimes clustering can help you label, or there's a lot of different ways that you can use it. So that's another one we have in here, fun one to play with. We have classification, which is what we're doing, multi-class. And there's a couple down here. So we're going to be using the computer vision one. We also have text analytics to do natural language processing stuff. So you could do like text classification, computer vision, recommendation, and anomaly detection. So there's some kind of in a group up here, and then there's some that are grouped out into their specific type of learning or algorithm or problem, I should say, so that you can kind of just go straight to that one and see what you need. So like we're going to be using pretty much all of these because we're going to be doing a computer vision model. So the first thing I want to do is convert to an image data set. So I can't actually use my files the way they are. This is going to convert it into the format that I need in order to build my model. So I can just drag and connect it there. And then from there, I want to apply some, well, I need the init. So this is going to transform my image. And I'll talk about that in a second. And then I also want the, I already got convert, apply image transform. So the other thing that I think is really cool about Azure Machine Learning Designer is like I've used this to present to non-technical people and show them like how the model was built. And I feel like it does kind of that process for you because it's already kind of in like this high level step-by-step way of looking at it. So even if you're building with Python, you can use, I guess we didn't get that far. Where's the scripting one? I should have showed you that. There, Python language. So you can create a Python model script. It takes a pandas data frame, and then you can do whatever you want, and you can log different things out to the output as well. And yeah, so the you can also execute. I haven't used this one yet though, so I can't speak to that well. But anyways, there's definitely things like if you have things that aren't out of the box, you can still use this. And the cool things that are built into it. So you go through, and then when there are different properties that it needs, it will give you that little kind of indicator that you need to select the properties from the left. And if I click on the init image transformation, I'm sorry, I'm just checking the chat quick here. Cool, I'm glad you're gonna check out the forms recognizer. How do you pick your classification algorithms to use, random forest or gradient? Honestly, I test different ones and see which works. And that's how a lot of professional data scientists do it. So when you start with a project, you kind of have an idea of what ones might work well for the data. Like the more models you build, you kind of get a sense for like, this will probably work better with X. But a lot of times I'll try different ones and then I'll see how it performs with that data. And yeah, so it's really just trying different ones, which is in that when you're trying to get that candidate model and that step when we were talking about like the full machine learning process, when you get that candidate model, that's where you would go through. So because I see we're almost at 7, I want to just go to my pre-built model here so I can show you that, what it looks like. Oh, oops, not the PyTorch one. I'll go back to Designer. So you can see the one that we're creating here. I'm going to jump into this one that I've already built out. So you can see what that would look like. I'm going to try zooming out a little bit. Oh, and the other thing that you can do, so like you can minimize this. You can't minimize this one. I kind of wish you could, but you can't at this point. And then the other thing is when you start using this a lot, you can just search, and because you probably will know what you're looking for, and it's going to automatic. So you don't have to go in to each individual like subsection of modules and try to find it. If you know you want to like split your data, you can just type split, and then you can grab it. So this search box is very useful. The other thing that's cool is if you've built any other models, any registered models that you have will show up here. And so there's times where you might have like a machine learning model be a step in your other machine learning model. And so if you create it in here, you can actually just drag and drop it and use it as a step in your designer. So the image transformation, let me show you that quick. In the parameters here, thanks, I forgot to show that because I was looking at the time and getting concerned. So I can resize it, I can tell it what size, I can crop, center crop, crop size. I wonder if you hit false, can you? Oh no, now my model's not trained. That takes a minute to train. Shouldn't have done that. Okay, anyways, you can crop to different sizes. You can change to, there's like a grayscale. You can rotate. So there's a lot of different things that you can do to normalize your images and help the performance and sometimes the size of the model or efficiency. So I actually think it's interesting. There was this one computer vision, this was a while ago now too, but somebody just resized the images and they were able to make to much smaller without losing accuracy, and were able to make a much more efficient machine learning model. So you want to do your image transformation for what makes sense. Maybe you need grayscale, maybe so you can do different things to help your model predict better, essentially, is what's there. And since I changed that, I don't think I'm going to be able to show you the results because I have to run it again. Let's see how long it takes to run. And while it runs again, let me show you where the endpoint is. So when this runs, you hit publish. And when it creates a publish, let me open up a new window. You create a real-time inference pipeline. So from the top of the screen, you just click create publish, or you click publish, it creates this inference, and then you click deploy. So it's literally like 3 clicks to get it to the point where you have a web service. And then it shows you where the web service input will come in. Maybe you want it to go through your processing. You could change that. With ours, we don't. It's already good the way it is. And then you can see that it's good, and then you would deploy it. And then when you deploy it, it creates an endpoint for you. And this is the endpoint that we looked up earlier. So all your different endpoints, whether you created them from a Python Jupyter notebook that you registered with our AML instance, that endpoint will be here. If you created it with Azure Machine Learning or Auto Machine Learning, if you created it with Designer, all your endpoints you can find here as long as you registered them, registered your model and created it with AML. You can test it, and then it also gives you the logic to consume it. So if I go here, I can look at how to consume it with C#, Python, and I have a notebook open that I already copied and pasted that script over. So I can run this, and we can see that it is, this is the same image of the crow that we tested custom vision with. We can see that it's 99% accurate. So I know I kind of went super fast there at the end of this one because we only have 4 minutes left, and I want to show very quickly the PyTorch model. But we've now created it with custom vision and also Azure Machine Learning Designer. This is still running. Might be able to come back to that, might finish for us. There's a lot of good stuff in Microsoft Learn too. So if you're not familiar with Microsoft's learning platform, I put the one in there for custom vision, but there's a lot of stuff for Designer as well that you could go in. So if you want to kind of see and go through the step-by-step, which I highly recommend you do, because I think these are really helpful for starting to understand and kind of get inspired. But to really like learn and understand something, I feel like you need to do, like your brain works differently when you actually do. So check out Microsoft Learn to play with some of this stuff. There's lots of tutorials online, lots of documentation in here. So like I said before, I have my compute, I have my Jupyter notebook, and if I go to Jupyter Lab, so now I'm running on that NC6 machine that I created, and I'm using a notebook, a cloud notebook now. Actually, do I have this open right here? I do, but I want to go into... So from the Azure samples, which I was showing you earlier through the different UI, they're also all available in Jupyter Lab in AML. And if you were to go in here, you would find this notebook exactly, this original train with hyperparameter tuning. And you could clone it into your Azure, and then you could just run it and start playing with it. So this one is a computer vision model using PyTorch, registering everything back with AML. And so you can go through and run this and see everything. It's going to create your cluster. So I already created mine, so it'll say found existing, but if you're just starting out, it will integrate back to the workspace from the config. So that's all built in. And then it's going to make a working directory. And then there's this training PyTorch. So if you go here, this is where we're actually going to be running the model from. And so you can go through and here see step-by-step how it's doing different transforms on the data set, just like we did in Azure Machine Learning Designer, how it's training the model, it's looking, and this is gonna be actually the broken apart. So if you think about what we did from beginning to end, we went from fully customized, fully pre-built with computer vision. Then we looked at custom vision and saw how we could then more specifically get down what we wanted with a pre-built model that we've customized using transfer learning. Then we looked at Designer, which is a completely custom model using the graphical UI. And then this one, we ran out of time, but with PyTorch, and you could use this, register it, create the endpoint, register the model, all that stuff, all within Azure Machine Learning, not having to worry about any of the DevOps stuff. Although there are some cool DevOps plugins as well for Azure Machine Learning. So is there any other questions? I have just hit 7. Let's see. What's an example of a project you decided to do on your own out of personal interest? The machine learning one, or the Python model that I started talking about for making music with machine learning. So before I knew that somebody already did it with the Magenta stuff, I started looking at different samples, MIDI files, and pulling them apart, and then using them to create. Another cool one was using recurrent neural networks, because I was trying to do music lyrics. I was taking in a text data set of different Beatles songs, and then using a recurrent neural network to then write a new Beatles song. None of them turned out well. So that's the other thing, when you look at recurrent neural networks, like it's really just finding the patterns in it and then predicting based on a seed. So you have to give it a seed text string, and then from there it keeps going. So if you ever see AI models that are able to like recreate text from different source, those are recurrent neural networks. They're really fun to play with, and there's a lot of really good tutorials out there and sample text that you could just grab. Another fun one, and I have this one in a blog post too, which is a good intro to this is a good intro to natural language processing for like the bag of words style, just using scikit-learn. So it's a really good intro for using machine learning to classify text in the bag of words. So this one was looking at the different wine reviews from sommeliers, and then building a model to predict like the price points in variety. And I actually deployed it to a game. It's a game now. So you can go in here and like if you're having your wine and you want to like try to predict like see how good you explain your wine. So this one here was just my sample one. So if I hit submit, it's going to post it, and it's going to look at all 3 of those models, and then it's going to return back a score on how I did. The other cool way to use this one is like if you're, so obviously I like wine. So another cool way to use this is like if you want to think about like I want like the different flavors that you want in a wine, you could put them there and hit submit and then see what it would predict. So this one is a rosé, and it's 81 to 90 point, and a price from 1 to 20. So those are some fun ones that I've built, some little like pet projects that I've played around with. So like it's fun to kind of think about something that you're into and that you want to kind of learn more about, or like that when I talk about like that question, those are kind of like good ways to start. Let's see, anything else? Oh, you want the link to that blog post. So all my blogs are on Cassie Breviu on dev.to. So there is that one, the one here. And I'm not sure if you were talking about the game. Here's the game if you want to play with that. Yeah, so predict the price of the wine based on the fancy description. That's essentially what this is. Like the price is, it says it's $1 to $20. And you can go to winemag.com and you can like post different ones that they put in there. It's fun. The other thing is like if you just put the word Napa in there, like it automatically raises the price, because like the Napa wine is always like more expensive. Oh, URL gets covered up by the headers. Okay, thanks for letting me know about that. Sorry about that. Did I miss any other links that you wanted, or did I get it all? I mean, and I can just put my GitHub in here, and my so like literally I'm just Cassie Breviu everywhere. I'll put my social in here where you can find everything. I think I could do this after. Oh, sorry. Well, it's on Twitter too. It's Cassie Breviu. So We are 4 minutes over. And so I just want to say thank you so much for hanging out with me this evening. I hope you are excited about machine learning and that you are inspired to try some new things out. So thanks so much. Bye.